Flight Attendant Insults Elderly Man finds out he owns the entire airline. Welcome to today's captivating story, a tale of pride, humility, and the surprising connections we sometimes discover in the most unexpected places. Our journey unfolds aboard a commercial airliner, where seemingly ordinary passengers and airline staff are thrown into a tense, dramatic situation. The conflict begins when a quick-tempered flight attendant carelessly insults an elderly traveler, not realizing who he truly is or what he owns. In just a few hours, truths will be unearthed, attitudes will shift, and immediate karma will strike with incredible force. Sit back, relax, and let this suspenseful story draw you in as it unfolds at 30,000 feet. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. It was a bright Sunday morning at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world, and a hub for countless domestic and international flights. Although it was early, the terminal was already brimming with the unmistakable hum of travelers navigating check-in counters, wheeling suitcases, and scanning the vast electronic departure boards. People with different accents conversed, each with unique stories and distinct destinations. Some were flying for business, others for family reunions, and a few simply embarking on the trip of a lifetime. At Gate 19, an elegant Boeing 777, with the company's livery silver wings and the carrier's logo emblazoned across the fuselage, awaited its boarding call. A flight crew mingled nearby, exchanging pleasantries while the gate agent carefully oversaw passenger check-in. Among the flight attendants was Rachel Harding. She was known for her impeccable uniform, dark hair twisted into a neat bun, and a smile that dazzled passengers, at least under favorable circumstances. But even a smile like Rachel's had its limitations. She often excelled at customer service in front of watchful managers or high-profile individuals, yet had moments where her patience wore thin and her impulsive reactions got the better of her. This particular morning, Rachel felt unusually irritable. The night before, she had argued with her boyfriend over a misunderstanding involving cancelled plans. Then she'd barely slept, her phone alarm ringing before dawn to ensure she made it on time for this important flight. Now, with a headache pulsing behind her temples, Rachel found herself in no mood to deal with fussy passengers or last-minute seat changes. She had tried to gather herself by taking a moment in the flight attendant's lounge, but the hustle of the airport prevented any real sense of calm. Just as passengers lined up for pre-boarding, a quietly dignified elderly man approached the gate. He wore a grey suit that, while slightly creased from use, seemed meticulously cared for. His silver hair was combed back, and a small badge on his lapel bore a subtle insignia, a stylized letter representing the airline for which he was about to board. He carried a black leather briefcase and a worn paperback novel under one arm. His name was Horace L. Parker, and at first glance he seemed like an ordinary older gentleman. He did not present himself ostentatiously, yet there was a certain serenity and confidence in the way he carried himself. Occasionally, his faint smile would widen as he took in the surroundings, the lively children skipping alongside their parents, the busy business travelers hurrying to the gate, and the pairs of best friends excitedly chatting about what lay ahead. Horace approached the gate agent with his boarding pass in hand, quietly nodding in thanks as he was cleared to board. Rachel made her way onto the plane before most passengers to perform her usual pre-flight checks. She prided herself on thoroughness, verifying that the oxygen masks and safety cards were in place, ensuring the galley was stocked, and reviewing the seatbelt demonstration equipment. She wanted everything to be immaculate, as any deficiency might garner a reprimand from her superiors. Lately, she needed every bit of job security she could muster. Rumors circulated that the airline was planning major layoffs, focusing on employees who lacked patience or garnered too many complaints. As the general boarding call sounded, a stream of passengers entered the Boeing 777's cabin. Rachel stood at the entrance, greeting each one, forcing a pleasant expression. A couple with a toddler came through first. She smiled briefly and directed them to their seats. Then came a group of boisterous college students, eager to begin their study abroad program in Europe, followed by a solemn businesswoman juggling 2 cell phones. Rachel welcomed them all with as much sincerity as she could manage. Eventually, Horace shuffled toward her. His steps were measured and slow, and it took him a moment to lift his briefcase into the overhead compartment. Rachel noticed his slight struggle, but, consumed by her mood, she did not offer assistance. Instead, she tapped her foot in mild impatience. Another flight attendant, Kara, stepped in to help Horace stow his briefcase, quickly resolving the issue. Rachel stood to the side, mentally acknowledging Kara's initiative with a mixture of gratitude and annoyance. Gratitude because it spared her effort, annoyance because it highlighted her own inaction. Horace, for his part, gave Kara a thankful nod and settled into his seat in business class. He had intentionally chosen a seat near the front for the extra legroom. Age had given him a bit of trouble with his knees, and he appreciated the comfort. For now, everything seemed in order, and the rest of the passengers continued to filter in with the usual mild chaos of overhead bins, filling up and last-minute seat adjustments. Finally, the cabin door closed, and the aircraft began its pushback from the gate. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, welcoming everyone, explaining the expected flight time, and listing the cruising altitude. Rachel and the other flight attendants began their safety demonstration, reminding passengers to keep an eye on the seatbelt sign and to consult the safety cards in the seat pockets. Horace followed along politely, though from his extensive background with the airline, he already knew every detail by heart. Once the plane reached its cruising altitude and the fasten seatbelt sign flicked off with a chime, the flight attendants sprang into action, preparing the drink carts and snack offerings. Rachel took the forward business class section, while Kara and another colleague attended to economy. Typically, Rachel liked being assigned to the premium cabin. It meant better tips and fewer passengers, albeit with higher service expectations. Under normal circumstances, she would rely on her polished smile and easy small talk to satisfy these travelers. But this morning, she felt that dull headache intensify, and she struggled to bring forth any warmth. As she navigated the drink cart down the aisle, Rachel found Horace engrossed in his paperback. She remembered him from the boarding process. The trouble with the overhead bin had left a small mark on her mind. Something about him, perhaps his unwavering calm, rubbed her the wrong way. It was as if he moved too slowly for her fast-paced world. She approached his row, forced a curt smile, and asked in a clipped tone, "Would you care for a beverage or a snack, sir?" Horace lifted his gaze from the book, offering a measured smile. "Yes, please," he said softly. "I'll take a cup of tea and perhaps a small packet of peanuts." Rachel nodded briskly, preparing a cup of hot water from the thermos. She reached for a tea bag, paused, and sighed as though the request were a monumental task. Irritation flickered across her features. She placed the tea bag in his cup and handed him a packet of peanuts. For a moment, her composure held. But as Horace reached for the cup, a slight tremor in his hand caused a bit of hot water to splash onto the tray. She hissed in exasperation. "Be careful, sir," she snapped before she could stop herself. "We can't have spills all over these seats." Horace apologized. "I'm sorry. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be," he said with genuine regret, taking a napkin to dab the water. I appreciate your help. Any other time, Rachel might have accepted the apology and moved on, but her irritation had been building like a dormant volcano. She snatched the napkin from him and made a show of wiping the seat and tray. Next time, maybe hold the cup more securely. These seats are expensive, and some of us would prefer not cleaning up after people's clumsiness. An awkward silence followed. Nearby passengers looked on with discomfort. Uncertain if they should intervene, Horace appeared taken aback but remained polite. "I do apologize," he said quietly, holding his tongue. Rachel frowned and pushed her cart down the aisle, leaving Horace to sip his tea in a subdued hush. Once she finished distributing snacks, Rachel retreated behind the curtain to the forward galley. She could sense that her remark had gone over the line. She felt uneasy, aware that people had noticed, but stubbornly, she justified her behavior by telling herself that she was overworked and exhausted. A small part of her tried to rationalize. He spilled it, so it was his fault, right? A short time later, the flight attendants began the meal service for business class passengers. Rachel returned to Horace's row with a tray of lunch options. "We have chicken or vegetarian pasta," she said. When he asked if the chicken dish contained mushrooms he was allergic, Rachel rolled her eyes. "I don't know offhand," she snapped. "I'll have to check the label, but you really should mention an allergy when you book your flight." Horace opened his mouth to speak but hesitated, deciding it was better not to stoke the flames. "I understand," he replied, quietly closing his paperback and waiting for her to confirm. Rachel disappeared to the galley, rummaged hastily through the meal carts, and finally returned. "It has mushrooms," she said stiffly, handing him the vegetarian pasta with a less than sincere smile. "So you're lucky you asked." Horace offered a gentle nod of thanks. "I appreciate your help," he said, deliberately kind, perhaps hoping to diffuse her. But Rachel would not be softened. She simply moved on to the next row, dishing out meals and responding mechanically to other requests. Meanwhile, some of the passengers in Horace's vicinity started whispering among themselves. Flight attendants were expected to maintain composure, especially in business class. The dissonance was palpable. A middle-aged woman wearing a corporate badge for Johnson & Johnson frowned at Rachel's rudeness. Another passenger looked at Horace sympathetically, noting how calm he remained despite the harsh words. A few rows away, Cara witnessed one of these exchanges and felt concern flutter in her chest. She had known Rachel for years, and though Rachel could be brusque, this behavior was beyond her usual short temper. Cara wondered if something serious was gnawing at her. She resolved to speak to her privately when an opportunity arose. The flight continued, with quiet pockets of tension. Approximately halfway over the Atlantic, the pilot announced mild turbulence approaching. The seatbelt sign pinged. Rachel and the others secured the galley, ensuring carts were fastened and items put away. Passengers returned to their seats, fastening seatbelts. The aircraft trembled slightly, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. Rachel checked seatbelts in the business class section. Approaching Horace, she noticed he had not fully clasped his belt. It rested loosely across his lap. Irritation flared again. She leaned down, hissed, "You need to secure your seatbelt properly, sir." When he fumbled to tighten it, her patience snapped once more. "Are you always this slow?" "I don't have time to babysit." Horace blinked, crestfallen. Her words cut through him, an unprovoked cruelty. Other passengers stared, aghast at her outburst. "My apologies," he murmured, voice trembling slightly. He tightened his belt as she hovered over him. Feeling the scorn behind her glare, he turned his face toward the window, looking at the endless stretch of clouds beyond. At that moment, the plane hit a small pocket of rough air, jolting them. Rachel stumbled a bit, losing her footing. A sudden shift in the aircraft's altitude sent her sideways, and she landed hard against the seat dividers. dropping the service binder she'd been holding. It clattered onto the floor. Immediate karma. Some might call it a slight cosmic balancing. A ripple of sympathetic but knowing glances passed through the aisle. She quickly gathered herself, cheeks burning, aware of the stares. Seething, Rachel glared in Horace's general direction as if it were somehow his fault. Without another word, she stalked off to the galley. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, and her headache pounded more fiercely than ever. She took slow breaths, trying to calm down, cursing her own luck for that embarrassing tumble. The turbulence eased, and soon the flight attendants were cleared to walk about again. Kara approached Rachel cautiously in the galley. "Hey," she whispered, "I noticed you seemed tense. Everything okay?" Rachel shrugged. "I'm just tired. And that old man keeps making everything harder," she muttered, words clipped. Kara's eyes widened. "Look, we all have bad days, but this isn't like you. The passengers are noticing, and we can't afford complaints. You know how they're cracking down." Rachel forced herself to remain silent. She knew Kara was right. Yet the mention of possible complaints fueled her anxiety. Determined not to lose face, she fixed her composure, smoothed her uniform, and decided to minimize contact with Horace for the rest of the flight. If possible, she planned to ignore him entirely, leaving any further requests to Kara or the others. But fate had other plans. Moments later, the seatbelt sign went off, and passengers began to shuffle to the lavatories or stretch their legs in the aisles. Horace took the opportunity to stand, albeit shakily, and move toward the front lavatory in business class. Rachel, returning from a quick check in economy, came face to face with him in the narrow aisle. Startled, he stepped aside to let her pass, but an accidental bump from another passenger caused him to jostle her. Rachel's temper, already stretched thin, snapped again. "Watch it!" she hissed. Her voice carried, catching the attention of at least half a dozen onlookers. "Why is it always you causing these problems? Are you not used to flying or something?" Horace froze. He glanced around at the staring faces. A flicker of something deeper passed across his gaze, disappointment, perhaps even a trace of sadness. But he said nothing. Instead, he took a breath, stepped around her, and quietly made his way to the lavatory. Passengers had grown tired of Rachel's behavior. Even among the flight attendants, a hush spread, a mixture of shock and concern. Kara exchanged worried looks with a senior attendant who had also witnessed the outburst. They both knew that if a passenger complaint reached the higher-ups, it could cost Rachel her job, especially given her rumored disciplinary history. The rest of the flight proceeded with an awkward unease. Rachel avoided Horace's row. She busied herself with other tasks, taking inventory of items in the galley, handing out landing forms where necessary, and answering call buttons for other passengers. Horace, for his part, remained quiet. He busied himself reading or gazing out the window, lost in thought. When the pilot announced the initial descent, Rachel felt a wave of relief, anticipating that she could soon escape this situation. She barely noticed Horace retrieve his briefcase from the overhead bin, tucking it near his feet for easy access. The plane touched down with a slight bounce and taxied to the gate. Once the seatbelt sign blinked off, people stood, collecting their carry-ons. As Rachel gathered her belongings, hoping to slip away swiftly, she noticed a commotion at the front of the plane. A man in a sharp business suit boarded the aircraft from the jet bridge, accompanied by a gate agent. His expression was urgent. He scanned the seats until his gaze settled on Horace. "Mr. Parker," the man said, voice filled with concern and reverence. "We were alerted you were on this flight. Are you all right, sir?" With that, he extended a hand and helped Horace out of his seat. "We've arranged a private car for you, but we didn't see your name on the official flight manifest." Rachel paused, confusion twisting across her features. She and Kara exchanged bewildered looks. Who on earth was Horace L. Parker, and why did he command such attention? She hovered near the front cabin, curiosity overcoming her haste to leave. Horace offered a small, reassuring smile. "I'm fine, Daniel," he said. "I decided to keep a low profile for this trip. I wanted to see how things were operating without any special treatment." Daniel, presumably an executive or personal assistant of some sort, nodded. "Your confidentiality is, of course, respected. Please, let's get you to the executive lounge." Rachel's stomach flipped. Executive lounge? Low profile? Special treatment? The puzzle pieces slammed together with frightening clarity. This man was no ordinary passenger. The airline was owned by a conglomerate of which Horace L. Parker was the majority shareholder, or, as some rumors said, the sole principal investor with controlling interest in the entire corporation. Essentially, Horace Parker was the boss of all bosses, the man at the top of the pyramid. He owned the entire airline. A wave of dread washed over Rachel. She felt her face drain of color. She had spent nearly the entire flight belittling, insulting, and humiliating one of the airline's biggest figures, its actual owner. As Horace turned to exit, he and Rachel locked eyes for a brief moment. In that fleeting second, she saw neither anger nor spite in his gaze, but something else, a profound disappointment, as if he had genuinely hoped for better. A hush fell over the surrounding passengers. Some who had witnessed the earlier scenes now recognized the significance of what was happening. An immediate buzz of whispered speculation spread throughout the cabin. Horace turned to Daniel and spoke softly, his words inaudible to Rachel. Daniel nodded, eyes flicking briefly toward her, and then helped guide Horace off the plane. Kara appeared at Rachel's side, face pale. "What just happened?" she whispered. Rachel could hardly breathe. She felt an overwhelming terror at the prospect of losing her job, overshadowed only by a sense of guilt. Not only had she been unprofessional, but she had also shown cruelty to someone who, by all appearances, had been nothing but polite. She was about to respond when her phone buzzed. She slipped it out of her pocket and saw a text message from an unknown number. The subject line read, "Immediate review requested." Her heart sank. The airline's internal system had already flagged her. The text instructed her to meet with a senior supervisor at the headquarters attached to the airport terminal as soon as she disembarked. Anxiety swirled in her gut. She watched as other passengers left. The flight crew began their usual post-flight checks, and the cabin emptied. Half in a daze, Rachel made her way toward the terminal, Kara by her side. "I'll come with you," Kara offered, placing a comforting hand on Rachel's arm. "We'll figure this out." They reached the terminal building, weaving through the hustle of travelers. Soon, a grim-faced human resources representative approached them. "Rachel Harding?" the woman asked. "Follow me, please." Kara tried to accompany them, but the representative held up a hand. "I'm sorry, this meeting is private." With a feeling that she was marching toward her doom, Rachel followed the HR rep into a small conference room in the corner of the airline's operational offices. There, behind a plain wooden desk, sat a stern-faced manager, along with an older woman dressed in a neat grey suit. The older woman introduced herself as Margaret Banning, Vice President of In-Flight Services. The moment Rachel sat, Margaret's gaze pinned her. "I understand you were one of the flight attendants on the inbound Boeing 777 from Atlanta," she said. "We have received a report directly from Mr. Horace Parker regarding unprofessional conduct." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She was speechless. The manager cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "Mr. Parker rarely travels incognito, but this was a personal test flight of sorts. He's investigating service quality across the airline." Margaret nodded. "We have statements from multiple passengers and crew members. They corroborate that you used derogatory and insulting language toward Mr. Parker, among other discourtesies." Her heart pounded. For a moment, she imagined launching into a defensive protest, citing exhaustion, personal stress, or misunderstanding. But deep down, she recognized the truth. She had allowed her frustration and temper to spill over, turning her into something cruel and unprofessional. She had done what they accused her of. No amount of denial would erase that. Margaret studied her face. "Mr. Parker has requested that we not terminate you, despite the severity of your conduct. We have rarely seen him intervene personally like this. However, he insists you undergo immediate disciplinary review, remedial training, and a probationary period." Rachel blinked. "He doesn't want me fired?" she asked in disbelief. She was certain that he, as owner, would want her gone. Margaret exchanged a glance with the manager. "He asked for compassion. He mentioned you appeared stressed, though it was no excuse for the way you acted. He believes in giving people a second chance if they accept responsibility." Tears stung Rachel's eyes. She had expected fury or a swift end to her career. Instead, Horace's response left her reeling. It was more painful, in a way, for it forced her to confront the contrast between his kindness and her cruelty. Margaret continued, "Your actions do warrant serious consequences. You'll be grounded from in-flight duty until you complete a thorough retraining program in passenger relations, conflict management, and corporate values. During this time, your pay will be reduced and you will be on a final warning. One more violation of our code of conduct, and you're out. Understood?" Rachel nodded, swallowing hard. She managed a hoarse response. "Understood." The manager let out a slow breath. "You may go. We'll send the official documents to your email. Please check in with HR to arrange your training schedule." She stood, legs trembling, and quietly left the room. In the hallway, she found Kara waiting anxiously. One look at Rachel's face told Kara all she needed to know. Rachel still had her job for now. Kara rushed to hug her, relief shining in her eyes. Rachel, numb, let the hug happen. As they left the operational offices, a part of Rachel longed to see Horace again, to offer a heartfelt apology. But he was nowhere to be seen, likely whisked away to a private lounge or already en route to a board meeting. A wave of gratitude mingled with remorse rolled through her. In the ensuing days, Rachel began her remedial training. She attended workshops on de-escalation techniques, empathy in customer service, and the airline's brand values. She listened to lectures from senior staff about how a passenger's happiness could make or break the company's reputation, especially in the modern age of social media. Although it was humiliating, Rachel started to see that she had been sliding into complacency and cynicism for quite some time. The meltdown on the Boeing 777 was simply the culmination of all her unprocessed stress and anger. One afternoon, as she completed a lesson on conflict resolution, her phone chimed with a calendar alert. She had an unexpected appointment at the airline's corporate tower downtown. Nervous, she hopped into a taxi and arrived at the sleek skyscraper that served as the airline's headquarters. She was directed to a high floor, stepping out into a polished corridor lined with artwork depicting aviation history. Finally, she reached a set of double doors. A receptionist nodded. "He's expecting you. Please go in." Rachel's heart pounded against her ribcage as she walked inside. Seated behind a large mahogany desk was Horace L. Parker. The office, though spacious, felt warm. The walls displayed models of different aircrafts from the airline's fleet throughout the decades. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city below. Horace, reading some documents, looked up with a gentle smile. There was nothing haughty in his demeanor, just the familiar, calm presence she had noticed on the flight. "Miss Harding," he said, rising slowly to greet her. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." She settled into the chair opposite him, trying to steady her nerves. "How is your training going?" he asked, Genuinely curious, Rachel swallowed. I'm learning a lot, she said softly. She hesitated, then added, I owe you an apology, sir. I was rude and disrespectful to you on the flight. I can't fully express how sorry I am. Horace studied her. Though gentle, his gaze held intensity. Thank you. I accept your apology. I appreciate that you've taken responsibility. It's essential for this job and in life to recognize when we've made errors. She nodded, tears gathering behind her eyes. I truly regret it. Horace exhaled, leaning back in his chair. I don't want any employee working under fear, but neither can we allow unkindness to define how we serve. Remember, every passenger is someone's parent, grandparent, child, or friend. We owe them courtesy. Rachel nodded again, this time more firmly. I understand. He regarded her for a moment. I read your file. You've been with the airline for some years. Your record was decent, but there were small incidents that hinted at rising stress. I believe in second chances. Miss Harding, provided you continue your training, keep your record clean, and demonstrate genuine change, you're welcome to resume flying in time. He paused, a half smile forming. I want to see you succeed, not fail. Overwhelmed, Rachel managed, thank you. She paused, searching for the right words. I have let my personal problems spill over. That's no excuse, but it's the truth. I promise I'll do better. Horace steepled his fingers. That's all I can ask. One more thing, I'd like you to join a special training flight we're conducting next month, part of an initiative to improve cabin service. It'll be a short domestic route, and I'll be on board. We'll have staff from different departments, some new recruits, and we'll want experienced personnel who've shown a commitment to growth. He eyed her kindly. Interested? Her jaw nearly dropped. You still want me on your flight? He nodded. If you're willing, consider it a test if you like, but more so, a chance for redemption. Rachel took a moment to process. Then she nodded vigorously. I'm honored. I'd love to be part of that. Horace's face softened further. Then it settled. I'll have my assistant send you details. She stood. Thank you again, Mr. Parker. I won't let you down. He walked her to the door. Safe travels, Miss Harding. As she stepped into the corridor, she felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected kindness. In her mind, she replayed every moment on that flight, her hostility, his patience, the shock of discovering he owned the airline, and then the immediate karma of her near downfall. Yet Horace Parker had chosen compassion. Over the following weeks, Rachel poured herself into every lesson the Remedial program offered. Colleagues and mentors began to see a difference. She practiced mindful breathing techniques to calm her temper, studied best practices in conflict resolution, and watched recordings of model flight attendant behavior. She realized how poor communication and built-up frustration could transform a once competent employee into a liability. Eventually, the day of the special training flight arrived. It was a short route from Chicago O'Hare to LaGuardia in New York, a flight just under 2 hours. Rachel arrived early in her newly pressed uniform, anxious but hopeful. She joined a group of flight attendants in a pre-flight briefing room, exchanging introductions with new recruits and reuniting with some veterans. To her surprise, there stood Horace Parker, no longer in disguise. He was present as an observer and mentor, wearing a standard blazer rather than his usual fine suits. He shook each attendant's hand, wishing them a good flight. During the flight, Rachel found herself calmly resolving small issues with passengers who had conflicting seat assignments, gently offering assistance to a mother traveling alone with 2 small children and assisting an older passenger with his overhead luggage without a hint of impatience. Each act was a conscious choice to show empathy and kindness. Horace watched from his seat at times, occasionally giving her an encouraging nod. Toward the end of the flight, an elderly woman accidentally spilled her drink, soaking part of the seat. The situation echoed that moment. Rachel had lost her temper before. But this time, Rachel reacted with immediate care. She quickly gathered towels, reassured the woman it was no trouble, and helped her move to a dry seat. She even replaced the drink with a fresh one at no charge and offered a gentle word to make her smile. Horace approached as the passenger thanked Rachel. He quietly observed the exchange, a mild grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. Rachel, noticing him, felt a flicker of nervousness, but she saw approval in his gaze. As the flight landed and passengers disembarked, Horace stayed behind to speak with the crew. "I'd like to recognize Miss Harding," he said, gesturing toward her. She showed exemplary patience and a willingness to help. Warm applause rose from the small group of attendants. Rachel felt tears prick at her eyes, remembering how drastically different this moment was from their first meeting in the Boeing 777-777's cabin. When she looked at Horace, she saw a mentor, someone who believed in giving people the space to grow rather than punishing them outright. In the days that followed, her reinstatement was made official. Her flight privileges and pay level returned, though she remained on a 6-month probation. She knew she had more to prove, but a renewed sense of dedication guided her every step. Passengers and colleagues alike began to notice her new warmth. Compliments replaced the previous murmurs of complaint. Back at the corporate tower, Horace Parker read the performance reviews trickling in. Rachel's name repeatedly appeared, accompanied by positive remarks. He leaned back in his chair, letting himself smile. The investment in her redemption had paid off for her, for the airline, and for every passenger she would serve, moving forward. He thought back to his initial sense of disappointment. Now, that feeling had morphed into pride. He had witnessed a transformation that reminded him why he loved this airline. It wasn't just about planes or profits, but about the people, their stories, and their capacity to learn from mistakes. Rachel, meanwhile, continued to attend her training sessions, determined never to revert to her old ways. She discovered a deeper empathy for the elderly and those with special needs. Her personal life improved too, as she communicated better with family and her boyfriend, working hard to balance her emotional well-being. Each flight became an opportunity to demonstrate the same compassion Horace had shown her. Whenever she encountered an older passenger, Rachel would recall Horace's soft-spoken dignity and vow to treat them with respect. On the occasional days when exhaustion threatened her patience, she paused, remembering the humbling moment she learned the man she insulted owned the entire airline. She reflected on the immediate karma of stumbling in the aisle after mocking him. Most of all, she remembered how, at her lowest point, Horace Parker had chosen understanding rather than vengeance. It was this continuous reflection that solidified the lesson. Everyone, no matter how frail or slow, deserves care and respect. Everyone, no matter their rank or resources, can show compassion in the face of adversity. The humiliating experience turned out to be a turning point in her career and life, a moment that nearly ended her job, but instead became the catalyst for her growth. Though she could never erase the pain she caused Horace, she hoped her renewed service and dedication to kindness would serve as atonement. As the airline soared to new heights, welcoming more passengers and expanding its routes, Rachel stood among the flight attendants on each journey. With every polite greeting, every gentle assistance, and every heartfelt smile, she honored the second chance given by the elderly man she had once so carelessly insulted. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of regret, redemption, and compassion. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with friends and family who might need a reminder that kindness and respect go a long way, even in the most stressful situations. By subscribing to the channel, you won't miss our future tales, each packed with heart, suspense, and valuable life lessons. We appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more captivating narratives that explore the human spirit under extraordinary circumstances. Stay tuned for more, and remember, everyone you meet might have a story that could change your life.